Hello, and welcome to today's edition of the Fintech Inclusion Africa podcast. Trends and application driving the fintech sector in Africa and beyond. And today I have with me as our guest speaker, Mr. Derek Kazimoto, who is the CEO of Tausi Africa Technologies, as well as the co-founder of Afro Pavo Analytics, who will be taking us through the exciting topic of AI and machine learning, revolutionizing fintechs, and innovations and applications. Mr. Kazimoto, thank you for joining us today and welcome on board. Please tell us about yourself and how this whole beautiful journey began with you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret, for having me at the podcast. My name is Derek Kazimoto. I'm the CEO of Tausi Africa. And at Tausi, what we do is we are the bridge of financial service providers in the informal sector or the underbanked by using credit risk algorithms to be able to facilitate credit. So basically, we are the middleman there that says who should get what and by what amount, right? And this journey, when I look at it, it started 4 years ago. Initially started by my sort of curiosity of data and how data can be used to sort of bring value and impact to Africa. So it was a bit of soul searching in the beginning, but it was very much enforced at the time I was in Cape Town doing my master's. And with that, that's when I really dug deep and got myself into building data projects for one, but also exploring how data, AI, and machine learning could be used to sort of help the informal sector. So that started with a credit risk project actually for one in Lesotho and the other one was in Cape Town. So for the Lesotho ones was building a credit risk algorithm for basically unsecured credit for merchants or famously known as spaza shops or kiosks in Southern Africa to be able to sell credit, actually sell airtime on credit. And the other second project was small groups of women to be able to facilitate credit. Yeah, so that's my history and background into the sector.
Thank you very much. Now it's good to know. So, given that quite an experience, and I want you to kindly tell us and the audience as well, just provide an overview of how AI and machine learning are currently being applied in the fintech industry.
Okay, so I think I would categorize them into three areas without mentioning specifically what. So one is decision making. So faster decision making because the data is there. AI could make a decision that, let's say, human beings would take 2 to 3 hours or 3 to 5 business days in literally seconds. The second one, I would say, personalized customer experiences. You can imagine having a million customers knocking at your door and having something that can manage them all at scale and at once. And I would say the third one, which is not pretty at the front, but very tedious for businesses, is operation efficiencies and compliance, right? I feel those are the three broad areas or major areas that AI and machine learning applies in the fintech space. And basically now they help that in if it's payments, if it's banking, if it's insurance, but those are the core functionalities that AI and machine learning actually do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So your submission actually gives rise to another question. You mentioned the areas of decision making, customer service, and compliance. So I would want to know what role does natural language processing play in improving customer service within the fintech sector?
Okay. So I think I can put an example for this. Imagine you have a business, and that business you want to service 1 million customers, and it's a new business, and you having the workforce of customer care that can service 1 million customers, 1 million queries. You can imagine in the payments business, if something goes missing, people have a very delicate relationship with money and where they put their money, right? Now, you being able
Mhm.
to get your funds to the right place in the right area, you would want a dedicated sort of relationship with your fintech or payment service provider or bank or telco, right? Now, if the telco or if the service provider does not have enough resources to meet their market, they could have layers, such as the first layer could be a chatbot, personalized, and more importantly, stressing on the personalizing part. It's just because people want to feel heard. Especially if you can include some sort of dialects in there, it makes that connection with the person. And some people go as far as virtual assistants, and then you get to customer care. So with all of those layers, natural language processing, they basically, and to be specific, chatbots help businesses scale. Yeah.
Insight. Now you made mention of another interesting topic because the fintech space is highly regulated. Now, when it comes to the compliance bits, which you initially mentioned, I would want to know what are some challenges you have noticed that fintech companies actually face in ensuring compliance with regulations while still leveraging AI for innovation.
Okay. I think I'll start with the personal one, more like a personal story for me. So initially, in Tanzania, I think I had to learn the hard way 3 to 4 years back, is we did a lot of the machine learning training of the models in the cloud, right? So you can imagine using AWS, Microsoft Azure, very well to help them train your models because they have the computing resources to actually keep up with the models that you're building. But what it turns is the regulations do not allow any sort of financial data to be hosted on the cloud, right?
Hmm.
So you cannot
Mhm.
work sort of a financial service provider if you're using the cloud. Everything has to be hosted on premise, but the data is not allowed to leave the country, right? So that is a big barrier of computing resources that most machine learning engineers end up facing, right? But that challenge brought about a different opportunity of whereby now we had to think outside of the box of how basically we could train with minimal computing resources, right? That meets compliance issues, but also provides value to the client, right? So those are the sort of the challenges I would say, especially in the data space, that a lot of AI and machine learning people face. And the other one is sensitivity of the data, right? For you to build a model, you need data. And having data that makes sense is normally people's data. How you handle that data is also a very key make or break situation to any solution or business that you're doing.
All right, thank you. So, still on this compliance issue, because I know it's one of the backbenches of the fintech space. In your own opinion, how do you think regulatory bodies are actually responding to the rapid adoption of AI and machine learning in fintech?
Okay. So I would say they actually did a very good job to start catching up. Um, Ideally, from the AI machine learning space, one of the key areas is data and data protection. The GDPR from Europe has set a very good precedence that most of the countries in Africa are actually now following. There is a Data Protection Act in Tanzania, Kenya, and many more other African countries that followed and being implemented, right? So, as from a regulatory perspective, that shows progress for them, for the regulatory bodies to actually start keeping up. But on the other area, we are seeing a lot of central banks setting up sandboxes for fintechs to actually start utilizing and actually testing their solutions, especially for fintechs of whereby you're in the gray area of not knowing how legal, if not legal, a solution is. But most cases, they might have a very high potential to the end customer. So being in that limbo is very nice. I think the first sandbox was started a few years back with South Africa, if not Nigeria, but they have been coming up. Tanzania recently launched theirs, I think, a few weeks back, and that is coming on as a trend that the central banks are becoming pro innovation, which is a good thing for the fintech space.
Okay. It's actually exciting to know that the regulators are taking a leap in that direction. Definitely, it holds some promises for the future. Let me take us back to the beginning when you mentioned the credit scoring and how you began your journey. I would want to know in what ways are these technologies, that's AI and machine learning, leveraged to actually improve credit scoring and actually aid lending decisions to customers.
Okay. So so basically, I would say what is available in the traditional sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what the technologies that we're building at Tausi helps the traditional lending to improve, right? So you can imagine getting access to credit for the likes of, let's say, places like in Tanzania. If you're lucky, 3 to 5 business days, and that is a secured loan. So you would have to give up a car, or basically your car card, or maybe your house title deed, and etc., for you to access a loan, depending on the amount, right? And the time for you, or the paperwork that it takes you to get that loan, it might take you 7 days, and then they'll process it for another 7 days. So it's 2 weeks. You're in dire need of cash, and you're not able to have that process streamlined, right?
Right.
Now, what we're building towards to is an Africa whereby I should be able to access credit as long as I've been credit scored, right? On demand in real time, right? And more importantly, unsecured, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that, with the solutions that we've built, we've been able to, let's say, if someone is asking for $100 worth of a loan, they should be able to get it the minute they want it, right? And they're able to get it unsecured with no many paperwork and no questions asked. So it's taking that process from 2 weeks to literally in less than 10 seconds, right? Now, that's the decision making power that I would say, not only from a customer perspective, but from the financial service providers that we're providing to the market. Yeah.
That's interesting to know. So we typically know that a lot of fintech firms, they are coming out with different innovations when it comes to products. But hence we're on the issue of AI. We want to look at highlight to us, let us know the role of AI in personalized financial planning and the creation of tailored financial products to customers as a way of innovation and creating the differentiation in the market space.
Okay. And when you say personal financial planning, does that include investments or only budgeting, if I may ask?
Both of them, please.
Both of them. Okay, so I have an interesting take on this. The African market is very much relationship based or word of mouth or influenced based when it comes to financial planning, when it comes to investment opportunities, and when it comes to tailored, let's say, financial products. That's it's going to be a different sort of story. And what personally I've noticed, there has been very good solutions on that area, but they have not yet taken up as much as I want, or at least I would love them to, right? And that comes as a culture issue of whereby I want to see what my grandfather did or my uncle or neighbor did for me to be able to take up on a solution, right? And on the other side of the coin, um, we are missing out on a lot of investments opportunities just because the information is out there and people are not accessing it, right? So that in Leo is a challenge. I would say not a culture problem, but also a consumer behavior um, journey that people have to take to trust technology to tell them put your money here and it will come back. And that's also a task to innovators to take up on that challenge to enable investments through tech. And with regards to tailored financial products, I would say AI has a very big role to play. And the role that has to play with AI is, for example, I would say, for example, in the insurance business, right? Insurance in Africa is considered as a luxury. A lot of pricing in insurance is flat priced, right? I feel like there's a lot of innovation that has to go within insurance. There's a lot of disruption that has to go within insurance, and tailoring the risk premiums for Margaret and Derek should not be the same if you have the data, right? And that's where I think, in terms of tailored financial products, hey, AI has a really huge gap to fill.
Right, thank you. You mentioned trust. Now, trust would always be a concern because it's people's money, they are concerned about where it's going to. Now, when we say the word trust, we also have to remember the word fraud because people seem to use them at the same time. I would want you to throw some light how AI and machine learning can be utilized to enhance fraud detection and its prevention in financial services to help build trust and even restore trust for customers. Thank you.
Okay. So actually, I would say in the banking industry, fraud detection algorithms are used heavily, right? And maybe they need to be improved, or a lot of working has to go within there. But it's it has been done, and it's actually being done, right? The one part that I believe it needs to be worked on heavily, especially I would say in all mobile money countries. I know for a fact, for East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, it's a very big issue in fraud, is the mobile money messaging scams. It's something very small, but people are trying to scam people to send them money to them, even though you had no sort of idea that you're going to send money to them, right? So it's a
Mhm.
very small problem. I mean, it's a very big problem, but an interesting problem that I think we need to take precedence to the email spam filters, right? So emails also went through the same journey of whereby there's a lot of phishing emails, there's a lot of fraudulent emails and scams that were happening in the late 90s and early 2000s that we formed the spam folder, right? Now,
Mhm.
when it comes to finance and money moving in and out, in Africa, you cannot avoid messaging and SMS being used as a tool, right? And does that mean we need to start having a spam folder on our messaging platforms? And how will that go about having it to reduce fraud, right? It's I've seen a lot of online talkings on how we should mitigate this, but I feel like it's an open conversation, and especially when it comes to mobile money, there's a lot that has to be done to sort of curb fraud, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Mm, thank you. So, with your experience, I would want you to share some insight with us. What are the most groundbreaking AI and machine learning innovations in the fintech space that you've observed recently?
Okay. So I think one thing that is very notable is most technologies that use AI and machine learning are not front facing, right? They power something at the back for it to enable a certain activity to happen, right? And one of the things that I would say has been on the rise over the last 7 to 8 years is doing microloans from your SIM card, basically from your mobile money, right? Mobile money was a groundbreaking invention back in 2000 and 2008. And then basically we're able to send and receive money based off your mobile phone number, right? But when you look at the stats, it says basically the credit card penetration in Africa is less than 5%, right? But I would like to think of it differently is the way the our journey towards credit cards credit cards is a bit different from the way the Western works, right? In a sense of whereby from my SIM card, I'm able to get a little bit of micro loans or a little bit on overdrafts on credit, right, from the telcos, right? But what enables that in the back end is the AI and machine learning algorithms that are able to credit risk me, right? So does that mean we have to change the term from a credit card, but for Africa is a credit SIM card? Or it's something that it's an open for discussion, or at least to be popularized, because I believe there is inventions for Africa that are working for Africa, but are not yet popularized as an African invention, right? So that's one thing I would say is one of the biggest innovations in fintech, at least what AI is powering, because I believe every month in the whole continent, there's more than $1 billion in loans that are dispersed to individuals on credit. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's touch briefly on the issue of predictive analytics. So, with your experience, tell us possible examples how predictive analytics powered by AI is being used to improve financial decision making.
Okay. I think that would still go back to the initial sort of discussion I just made with credit, right? But other than credit, I would go to understanding your customer. So basically, now I'm going to customer segmentation, right? So basically, how well do you know your customers, right? In the traditional sense, if I'm a bank, customers will be grouped based on how much money they transact in and out of their bank accounts. So you have your high value customer, and then you have all of the other brackets, right? Um, but that most of the times, banks end up having a very big problem answering problems as why are there a lot of dormant accounts, why are people not transacting, why is the money not staying within the bank, right? Now, with that, what AI comes in is you look at the problem differently as yes, one high value customer could be having a different relationship with the bank. So you check on how basically people relate to the bank, and that falls under different customer segments. So some customer segments would be put money from cash and then they spend digitally. Some would be they only use the bank for a certain product loan. So even how you communicate to that person or your marketing communication to that person is more different to a Gen Z who just wants the bank, the card for something to look cool, or having a retiree who just wants to protect their savings, right? And for
Right.
now, the way marketing works is all of your customers will get the same message to everyone, right? Instead, you could tailor that based on your segment to build that relationship and trust between you and your customer.
Thank you very much. Now, the concepts of AI and machine learning and the recent innovations going on in the fintech space, they are all very interesting. However, there would always be the issue of ethical considerations for our actions and inactions in businesses. I would want you to throw some light. What are the biggest challenges that fintech companies face when they have to integrate AI and machine learning into their operations?
Okay. So I'll start. So there's two parts. So one is the ethical, and then the other one is integrating of the ethicality into your operations. Um, it's a tricky place when it comes to ethics and fairness and elimination of biasness. I would say the challenge comes is the available data used to train the AI and machine learning algorithms, right? Depending on the data, that's what the algorithms will put as an output. So the question takes a step back of looking at where do we find inclusive data before we feed them to the algorithms so that they can do the decision making that is not biased and fair. And the other challenge is biasness and fairness is also another tricky place because that is very subjective, right? And that's where I think my comments on the ethicality and biasness and fairness of things comes in, right? And the other part is integrating AI and machine learning into the operations. Is I normally tell people we are very much stuck up with the technologies and we forget to work with the people you're implementing your solution on, right? So that you can understand how to properly implement it, right? So if you want to implement, let's say, digital onboarding, right? So something that is coming up on the rise in onboarding of banking customers or MNO customers is fingerprint detection, and then they could check if these fingerprints are in line with Derek's national ID card, for example, right? And then with that, then they have identified me, then they can onboard me into, let's say, a bank or a telecommunication company as a customer. Maybe it could be even insurance, right? But that, as much as I say it, it's very easy for me to say like, oh, it's quick. You just uh, use your fingers and your camera, then it onboards it, right? But when you go to market and you start implementing it, that it's not me who built the solution who's going to be implementing that. It's the people that now need to use the solution that you have built. So something very simple is the language from Kiswahili for the case of Tanzania to English, right? So people maybe would be better to use the solution if it's in Swahili and not in English. And those are the small things that I feel as a techie person, we need to invest more time into understanding the dynamics of operationalizing a solution in the market.
Uh, Thank you. So I also want you to throw more light on ethical considerations. Now we've identified that the problems actually exist, but then we want to find out how do we actually address ethical concerns that are related to bias and fairness in AI-driven financial services.
Okay. So I would say Addressing the ethical concerns primarily sits with the data that, or at least the data accessed for training these algorithms. A good case of example is people who scrap your SMS data and contact data, for example, to be able to build, let's say, a credit score, or to be able to build something that will be able to sort of um, understand the user, right? Now, if I consent to that, there is no problem, right? But once that information gets leaked out, or my relationship I have with the financial service provider gets leaked out, then now that becomes a problem of a tech company abusing personal data for their benefit, right?
Mhm.
And this comes from a lot of being able to want to know more about a person so that you can sort of service them. But there's a fine line between abusing their freedom of their data and you using it for the just good.
Okay. And we believe we'll get there as we progress with AI and machine learning. So I'd want you to tell me what or how do you see the role of AI evolving in the fintech sector over the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay. So I think the one part is all of the tedious and boring processes that are currently there would be streamlined or automated. So you can think about a lot of compliance issues and a lot of due diligence and things that in the financial services sector are very important will be sort of streamlined, right? That's where your natural language processing comes in, computer vision to sort of automate that. But more importantly, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, our our relationship to money, especially in Africa, will change just because the more we get, or at least tools are built that are more digital, we will be moving from a cash based society to a cashless society.
Right. Thank you for that. So fintech has been a buzzword, it's been a very it's a young industry, but I would say it's booming. And I think what potential do you think in financial inclusion in underserved markets globally?
Okay, so basically, the fact that you've said, oh, you've used the word underserved markets, it means the current systems in place do not fully serve the whole market at 100%, right? And basically with AI, it's efficiency is how you can get to a person in a very remote area and you can know them and actually be able to provide a service to them, right? And that is what basically it's doing. You have 1 million customers, 1 million can be served right then and there, as long as they can have an access or a channel to the technology, right? And that's what we are seeing that's happening in the continent. That's what we're seeing. More people are getting included into the financial services just through these tools and things that are being built for the markets. Yeah.
That's interesting to know. So, as we take a futuristic perspective, what emerging trends in AI and machine learning do you believe will shape the future of fintech?
Um, I think natural language processing is a good place to start, that it will change the way we relate to money. I'm very curious to see in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, what generative AI is going to be doing in the space. Um, but more dominantly from an African perspective, Our first biggest problem is cash versus a cashless society, right? It is very expensive to hold cash. It is very expensive to move cash. It is very expensive to transact in cash, right? Because there's safety, there's a lot of things that go with it, right? Um, so even before we get to AI, is having the infrastructures in place, having all of the payments areas to do in place of enabling a cashless society, right? Once we have that in place, then AI and machine learning can come and do a lot of things, from tailored financial products to investments, to being able to chat, basically having a robo advisor chatting to them about, hey, where should I put my money, and etc. But I think we'll get there once only we have the infrastructures in place to enable a cashless society. Yeah.
Definitely. That would really be an interesting time to see.
Yeah.
Right. So, being in the fintech space for a while, understanding the challenges and the capabilities and the future for fintech firms, for new fintechs or fintech startups who are looking to harness AI and machine learning to gain a competitive advantage, what advice would you give to them?
Okay. So I think one key thing that comes up very strongly is you don't start building a solution from the solution, but from the problem, right? If you start with the technology, then you force a use case to use your technology in. But rather, you have to start from the problem and define the problem, and then you go back to what technologies you use to solve that problem. And I feel like that's the key ingredient that you need for any AI solution to work. Because at the end of the day, your end user does not know or does not need to know if you're using AI or not. They will want to know if you're solving the actual problem. Yeah. So that would be my key number one advice to any sort of entrepreneur who wants to venture into the fintech and AI space.
That's very interesting to know. So, just as we wrap up this session, I would want you to leave us with your keywords. What's your final take? What would you say about the whole space of AI and machine learning as a final wrap for our audience?
Okay. I think the final wrap would be building AI solutions is a collaborative work. So it's not only AI or techies who should build, but also we need the regulators, we need business leaders, we need a lot of government interventions and people to come into the space and then contribute for us to have a well sort of better Africa, basically, right? So, for example, from a cash to cashless society, from a non-fraudulent society to a society of whereby we can transact globally, let's say from Tanzania to Ghana with no hiked up fees and etc. Right? So to do that, I believe AI plays a role, but there's many more stakeholders that need to come into the play for us to achieve that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kazimoto. This has been a very insightful session. So, we hope that we can see the new innovations and capabilities that AI and machine learning and new innovations would hold for us in the future in the fintech space. Thank you for joining us to this on this session, and to our audience, thank you for following us on this one. We hope to see you soon again in our next edition of the FinTech Africa podcast. Thank you and bye bye.